Welcome to The Lineman Life, a podcast for power professionals. Here's your host, David Spooner.
Welcome to the Lineman Life podcast, a podcast about you, the power professionals that keep the lights burning. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast. We've got a lot of really great content coming up in the future. Today we're going to talk about complacency. I'm going to share with you a couple stories about how I was complacent. I think you're going to learn something from it. I'm also going to share with you the biggest reason why you should never be complacent. If I were to ask you, would this be the year you get injured because you're being complacent? You'd probably answer no. If you'd asked me this same question back in 2005, I probably would have answered exactly like you did. In the next 20 minutes, you're going to learn what happened to me in 2005 when I got complacent. You're also going to learn the biggest reason why you should never be complacent. If you're a lineman, you're going to have to deal with being complacent sometime in your career. You've been working for a while, you know your job, everybody looks up to you because you know what you're doing. People count on you to know what to do when you're working trouble, building lines, talking to customers. You are really confident in yourself in what you do. You don't really back up from anything. Have you noticed yourself taking some shortcuts lately? You talk to yourself, I've done this every day for years. I know what I'm doing. Maybe you don't follow work procedures exactly like they're written. You tell yourself, that step's really not needed. I've been doing this for 20 years and never had a problem. I know what I'm doing. You don't follow the safety rules exactly like they're written. You make yourself believe it's okay. That rule needs to be changed. That rule doesn't work today. Does this sound like you? It might be time to rethink what you're doing. I thought the same way as you do, and I made some poor decisions. One of them got me some minor injuries, and one of them almost cost me my life. Both of these screw-ups were due to being complacent, not following procedures, thinking I knew better. If you stay in this business long enough, sooner or later, if you're complacent, it's going to catch up. It's going to catch up to you. Something's going to jump up and bite you right in the ass. So back in early 2005, I was on a one-man service truck. I'd been a journeyman for almost 20 years by then. So I was pretty comfortable in my skills. My main functions on that service truck were to catch all the trouble, run temporary and permanent services, and work on street lights. The district that I was working in at the time was very large. If you need to drive from one end to the other, it was about an hour and a half drive. I had a service order for a tap up, and this was to set 10 meters on a condominium complex in a resort area on Edisto Beach, South Carolina. Now, Edisto Beach was at the far end of our service territory. So the underground service I was dealing with was parallel 300 MCM, single phase service. So the line crew out of my base yard had been there the day before, and they actually were the ones that ran the service, and they put all the markings on the cable, the color tape, they put the lugs on the service on the transformer side, and they made it up in the meter can. But there wasn't a city approval, so they couldn't set the meters. So That afternoon, on the day before, the approval finally came in. So I was being sent the next morning down there to set all the meters, tap it up, and get them hot. As soon as I pulled up to that job, I started to get a call from dispatch. 1611, we've got a trouble call on Chapman's Landing Road. I started thinking, man, Chapman's Landing Road, that's all the way on the other end of our service territory. It's going to take me a long time to get there. So I actually told dispatch, it's going to be a while before I get there. And they said, well, there's nobody else available, so you're just going to have to take it. So I told them, okay, as soon as I was done with this service order, I would head that way. So I opened up the underground transformer. The parallel service looked to be, it was marked properly, it had color tape on it. I walked over to the meter can, everything looked fine in there. So I was in a hurry. And also another factor in all this was my friends were the ones that installed the service. So I was pretty confident in them. So I decided not to ohm it out, take the time to ohm it out and make sure all the service conductors matched up in polarity. When I was doing this, like I said, this was a resort area. This place was very busy. There was all kind of construction workers. There were salesmen taking people in and out of these condos. It was a very busy area. So I connected the service to the parallel service to the neutral spades, and then I connected one each of the hot legs to the secondary spades, making sure that I had its matching one isolated, because when I heated up the first one, it's going to make the other one come hot. It was all good until I took that third conductor and went onto the secondary spade with it. There was a huge explosion. I fell back. As soon as I fell back, I could feel my arm was burning. I ripped my rubber glove off, and there was a huge piece of molten metal that had fallen down into my rubber glove and was burning my arm. People were running over to me. Are you okay? Are you okay? I could smell hair burning. I reached up, and I had a mustache at the time, and my mustache was pretty much not there anymore. I couldn't see out my safety glasses. They were so badly pitted up and smoked up. I took my hard hat off, and it was a white hard hat, but the whole front of it was completely black from the arc. It was about this time I came to the realization that service had been marked wrong. So somebody called the ambulance, and like I said, there's a lot of commotion going on here. There's a lot of people around there, and it must have made a lot of noise. I really didn't hear it because I was the one involved in it, but there was people everywhere standing around there. Ambulance came, and I really wasn't hurt that bad. I had some second-degree burns on my arm where the hot metal fell down in there, and my face it was just red, a little bit red. But other than that, I was fine, except for my pride. My pride was hurt with all those people standing around. It was embarrassing. I called my supervisor, and I told him what happened. So he told me he'd pull somebody off another job to go catch that other case of trouble that I was supposed to be going to. And I told him I'd finish up what I was doing down there and go ahead and set the meters and head on back in. So that's what I did. I disconnected all the conductors, ohmed them out. I properly remarked them, made up the services, set the meters, and then I headed back to the barn to confront the line crew. I had about a 40-minute drive back to the barn, and I was pretty upset. In my mind, it was the line crew's fault. They set me up. They marked the cables wrong. When I got to the base yard and I got out that truck, that crew saw me coming across that yard, and they knew that I was pissed. Somebody tells me, hey, it was Carlos. Well, Carlos was an apprentice we had. Carlos is the one that marked it wrong. He's the one that screwed up. Well, I was making a beeline straight for Carlos. And the foreman of that crew stepped in front of me and said, "What are you doing?" Of course, I said, "Hey, Carlos screwed up. And look what happened to me." The foreman looked at me and said, "Spooner, did you ohm that wire out before you tapped it up to make sure everything was okay?" "No, but it was Carlos's fault." "Hold on a minute," the foreman said. "You're at fault just as much as him. You didn't check for yourself. He's just learning. You know better." I really didn't have an answer for that because it was true. If I'd followed procedure, I would have caught it. But I was in a hurry to get to that trouble call. The only thing I could do, I just walked away to calm down because I knew that that foreman was right. Do you sometimes think like I did? You don't really believe in that safety rule, so you don't follow it. Maybe you've done the same thing for years, like hooking up a parallel service and never had a problem. I don't need to double check behind somebody. Maybe you've been doing something you know is wrong. You've been doing it for years. Maybe you take shortcuts. I've done it before. Nothing happened. I was the same way. I only had a few major incidents happen to me in 34 years. But it only takes one to change your life forever. I only got some minor burns that day. But the next time I was complacent and I screwed up, it almost killed me. Later that same year, 2005, I got a call out. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. And back then we had a one-man call out. So there'd been a thunderstorm earlier, so I figured whatever I had was probably due to that thunderstorm coming through. The call, it was a lights out to about 50 customers. Now, these customers were on the end of a long two-phase radial overhead line. And at the head of that line, it was protected by 2 oil reclosers. When I got on the scene, first thing I did was look at the reclosers and noticed one of them was open and one of them was closed. So I wanted to ride the line out and look first because maybe I would get lucky and it was just lightning. And if it was lightning, I could just go ahead and close the recloser back and everybody would come back on again. As I was patrolling the line, I came to where the 2 phases stopped and one phase continued further on down the road. And on that pole where that transition was, there was an open delta bank feeding a church. Now, the single phase part didn't have any it was jumping straight through. It went from 2 phases to 1. There was no kind of line fuse or anything protecting the single phase part of it. So I continued patrolling the single phase line because I saw there was no lights in that section too. So I knew the single phase part was the one that was on that recloser that was open. Sure enough, 2 spans down from where the wire ended, the wire was on the ground out in the road because a large pine tree branch had fallen out of a tree and burned the wire down. I got on the radio and I called dispatch to start looking for some help, somebody to come help me. While I was waiting on my help, I was going to try to do as much as I could to get started. So the wire was laying in the road, and I wanted to get it out of the road because there was a car coming every now and then. And it was bending up the wire when they were running over it. So I wanted to get the wire out the road. I knew where I was. It was dead because all the houses around where I was standing, they didn't have any lights. I reached down and grabbed that wire with my bare hand. Once I touched it, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. It still had voltage on it. I tried to drop it, but my muscles were so contracted, I couldn't open my hand. I had that thought go through my mind. this might be it for me. My knees buckled and I fell to the ground. Luckily, when I fell, the wire came out of my hand. It was at this point that I realized the open delta bank, 2 spans down, was back feeding onto this single phase line because the other phase feeding that bank was still hot. It didn't help that the road was wet either. Before I got up off the ground, I told myself, man, you know better. The line wasn't grounded. The recloser should have been taken off before I touched anything. I had been complacent. I never told the guys that came to help me what happened because I was so embarrassed about what I did. I was lucky they didn't find me dead lying on that road holding that wire. This incident was a life changer for me. It changed my whole way of thinking. I never told my wife about that night. And the reason is she would worry. She worried anyway, but she'd worry even more if she knew I was out there doing unsafe things. Now, she'd be thankful I didn't end up dead lying on that road, but she wouldn't understand why I took a shortcut. Besides my wife, I've got 2 kids that depend on me. This is why I changed from being complacent. I changed for them. Because I thought, what would they do without me? Just like me, your family depends on you. What would it be like for your wife and kids if you got hurt or killed? What would it be like for your mom and dad if you weren't here? Think about your family when you want to take that shortcut. Think about your family when you don't follow that safety rule. If your family knew you were being complacent, they wouldn't appreciate it. My family is the biggest reason I quit being complacent. And this should be your biggest reason also. The other thing is, if it's not you, you sure don't want somebody else's family losing a loved one because you were complacent on the job and it leads to one of your coworkers getting injured. I challenge you to get out of that complacency pitfall. Follow the safety rules in the spirit in which the rules are written. Follow procedures to the book. Most safety procedures we have they're written in blood. It's happened to somebody else. That's why they're in there. They're there for a reason. There's really no reason to take shortcuts. Your company pays by the hour, just like mine did. I'm sure they want it done correctly. So today is a new day. You've got a chance to change. So if you won't do it for yourself, do it for your family. So I'm going to ask you again, is this the year you're going to get injured from being complacent? Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I really do appreciate you guys listening. I know you don't have a lot of free time during the week to do things, and when you listen, it is appreciated. Next week, I'm headed to Loveland, Colorado for a utility safety conference. Now, I'm excited about it. I know it's kind of funny to be excited about safety, but I'm excited about it. I get to get off the Big Island and head to the mainland for a while, so that's always exciting for me. I'll try to bring you a couple of reports from there. I think they're going to have a lot of vendors with different safety products and stuff like that. So maybe I'll find something that I can report on. So again, I do appreciate it. Until next week, this has been the Lineman Life Podcast. I'm your host, David Spooner, saying aloha from the Big Island of Hawaii.